Great. Thanks, Jenna. Again, thank you to all of you for showing up today on this afternoon after lots of stuff going on. We are very appreciative of having you here today. We are here as part of, sorry, I am getting very distracted by all the ding. Rosie, would you mind going back to the first one? Because I just wanted to talk a little bit about what OFAR stands for. If you saw this acronym somewhere, Open for Anti-Racism is what it stands for. And this is our showcase that we're doing today. Go ahead and go to the next one. Thank you. So a quick overview of what we're going to be doing here today. Right now we're doing welcome, and we're going to introduce ourselves in a moment. And then we're going to have a little bit of an overview of the program that we went through and what we have achieved as a collective. And then each of us is going to take about 10 minutes to share our individual projects that we worked on for the OFAR program and discuss some of what the challenges and successes were as we went through that. And then at the end, we're going to have a time for questions and answers. So we're asking that if you wouldn't mind to just hold your questions, or you can just drop them in the chat and then we'll answer them at the end. That way, each of us can just go ahead and share with you what we've done and then open it up at the end for any questions. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started by introducing ourselves. So I'm Kelsey Ford. For those of you who don't know me, I'm English faculty here at CRC.
Hello, everyone. I'm Noah Gardner. I teach biology here at CRC.
Hello, Gail D'Artes, Theater Arts Adjunct Faculty.
Hi there, Jenna Trench, biology faculty and teaching and learning lead for science, mathematics, and engineering.
Hi everyone, I'm Feders Ahmed Ramirez. Some of you know me as Feyruz or Rosie, and I am an adjunct. I teach English composition and English as a second language, CRC. Thanks for being here.
And I probably should note, Greg Byrer was actually our leader for this team, and he is over in England this semester, as many of you may know, so he's not able to join us today. But at the end of this presentation, we have a link to the website that we built with each of our pages, and he has a page on there as well, and I'd encourage you to check that out. I'm going to turn it over to Rosie. She's going to give us an overview of the program.
All right, thank you, Kelsey. Okay, so just a quick overview of the Open for Anti-Racism Learning Goals and Outcomes. So we worked really hard to develop a deeper understanding of how Eurocentrism and white supremacy has influenced and shaped our academic disciplines and our teaching philosophies about learning and assessment. We also worked really hard to integrate open educational resources and open pedagogy, such as non-disposable assignments, to support anti-racist and inclusive teaching and learning. In addition, we also diversified the people represented in our course content and actively engaged students in critical inquiry about topics that were meaningful to our students, so student-centered learning. We also worked really hard to incorporate metacognitive, active learning to monitor students' learning processes in reading and writing, while centering intersectionality in our course material so that students can see themselves as valued members of a community of scholars. And here is our OFAR participant showcase. So basically, if you click on this link over here, it'll take you to our personal website. And then this is our OFAR showcase video. I'm not going to play it, but at this point, we're just going to kind of take turns, 10-minute increments, and talk a little bit about what we did in our courses. So if that's okay with y'all, should I stop sharing now? And whoever's going to go first? Should I stop sharing now? Okay. Thank you, Jenna. Whoever stopped sharing.
So I think Noah's going first.
Oops, sorry, my bad.
Hi, can we hear me? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
we can
we
hear you.
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
yes.
All right. Great way to start. Hi, everyone. All right. I'm Noah Gardner, biology faculty. And yeah, I just loved everything about this program, everything that it had to offer. So many resources, so many things to learn, and such a positive and constructive community. And I guess my biggest takeaway from this program and from, anti-racist teaching in general is just, the work is never finished. And what is the expression? Perfect is the opposite of good. So, just keep doing a little and you will eventually do a lot. So with all that said, I loved everything. I absorbed it all like a sponge. And this was my shotgun approach to OFAR. I wanted to do a little bit of everything. And while maybe not solve racism for good, just get a little bit closer to it. So here were my tangible goals, I guess kind of broad sweeping, to combat racial achievement gaps in my class, to humanize biology, and to promote empowerment through scientific literacy. I didn't mention that this class was for the non-majors general biology class, the general biology class that's taken by non-majors. So here's kind of how I put these ideas into practice, these goals into practice. So these are the slides that I showed at the OFAR showcase in spring. They've got kind of just an overview of what my project looked like. So to just lay it out, many students come into non-majors biology thinking that they hate science or feeling like science isn't for them. And I wanted to take a multi-layered approach to centering the students and their identities. Heads up, many students are apprehensive about getting into these topics, even just the idea of saying that we're going to be doing anti-racism in the class. Often you need to sell it to them. And so the first thing I did was to lay out the fact that science has been an old boys club for a while, and that we need to talk about politics in order to combat that. And not talking about it is also a political decision, right? It is the political decision of perpetuating the status quo, which we make invisible and apolitical. So in week 1, I asked my students what they thought about the intersection of white supremacy, patriarchy, and science. And many students talked about their own vision of anti-racism and the fact that representation in science curricula has been dry and focused on the achievements of old rich white dudes. So I sought to have them not only do science themselves this semester, but also to see why this was, to see that science has been gatekept by the old guard for centuries and used as a tool of oppression to maintain white supremacy. So if you look through these slides, I guess I can enlarge them. You can see my students taking many avenues to discuss anti-racism, along with how their own identities have interacted with the perception of science and scientists. So give them the opportunity, the space, and they will share. Just matters how you sell it. So to that end, with the "we are getting political because science has always been political" discussion right out of the way, I wanted to make social issues in biology entrenched into discussions of all topics. So how did these topics come about within the field of science, the societies and power structures in which they arose, and how have they impacted the science community? So there's some examples here from our discussion of evolution, incorporating a discussion of scientific racism, from our discussion of climate change, incorporating ideas of colonialism and white supremacy. So learning not just the what, but the how and the why. And beyond that, I wanted to give students the chance to do some course creation themselves. So there was a line from one of the papers that we read in the OFAR class. I actually wrote it down because I just felt so added by this line. It was catching a breath. The line was about open pedagogy, and it said, if successfully answering well-crafted multiple choice questions requires content mastery, then authoring multiple choice questions surely requires even greater content mastery. I felt like there should be like a mic drop at the end of that line because it's so true, right? Creating course content requires just as much, if not more, mastery than being a passive receiver of it. So we started off, I would take some old quiz questions and have students make their own. So I would say, like, take this same multiple choice question from a past quiz and write a completely different, new, correct answer to the question, and write a completely different, new distractor, wrong answer. And they really liked that. They really got a sense of appreciation for building the course with me. And we moved from there to generating H5P content using Libre Studio for their peers to interact with and actually getting those embedded into the learning modules. There were all sorts of really fun ones. I attached a few of them here. We had students who made slides, videos with quizzes embedded, flashcards, all kinds of really cool stuff. This was my first foray into open pedagogy, and overall, there was a little bit of a learning curve. You have to guide them to make sure that they're doing formative things with it. But I saw a real improvement in the overall engagement with the material. So finally, we put these skills together and had students talk about, so kind of incorporating all three of my goals here now, right? Having students bring it together and talk about these topics from an informed scientific perspective. So many students come into my class with ideas about a lot of these topics. And this is another thing to be aware of, that you need to kind of be guide railing them to make sure that they're not engaging with some of these hot button issues the way that they might, jump into like a Facebook thread and just like start like riffing, So on topics like vaccines or like transgender healthcare, we learned how to seek out credible sources of information, how to exercise information and media literacy, and how to discuss these controversial scientific topics respectfully, thoughtfully, and with an eye towards equity. So that the next time they're at the Thanksgiving table and their, QAnon uncle is talking about trans people or climate change or racism, they can be empowered to make informed arguments. So to that end, after students practice plenty of talking about these issues with each other, I had them try practicing engaging with someone who is misinformed, which is challenging, right? But that was really the main thrust. Going back to that title slide, the main thrust of my anti-racist project, which was showing students that biology isn't necessarily an old boys club and like a dry set of mechanisms and terminology to memorize. It's something that's in their lives right now. It's something that's part of their identities, and it's entrenched in issues of equity that affect them. Racial justice, also LGBTQ rights, colonialism, healthcare, women's reproductive rights. And the hope is to empower students by giving them a skill, reading, writing, talking science that they will take with them from my class. Thanks, everyone. That's all I got. I hope my mic was on.
Thanks, Noah. That was awesome. I don't know if anybody else is as excited about the fact that he also is doing reading and writing and critical thinking English skills in his science class. But I think that's so cool. So anyway, I'm gonna kind of shift gears here for a moment and not share my screen for a little bit as I just take you through a little bit of my own process as I went through this course, and then I'll share some things with you on the screen as well. I'm going to kind of take you back. If you, I know some people here seem like they are from our sister colleges as well, but those of you who have been at CRC for a little bit, you may remember in the spring of 2023, when we had the human library here on campus. And that was an opportunity where humans were library books that you could check out and learn about them. And I brought my students to that human library, and we both the students and myself, found it to be such a moment of individual and collective growth as we learn more about people who were not like ourselves. And this experience, as we went back to the classroom and talked about it, really prompted a desire in me to create a similar environment in my curriculum for my English Writing 300 course. So when I saw Greg Byer's email about participating in OFAR last year, I thought this is the perfect opportunity to engage in some of this work. I had already been doing a lot with OER. As some of you may know, I was the OER lead for our CAC, and almost every single class has been OER materials for the last 5 years. So part of OFAR is to be OER, but I wasn't quite sure if there was going to be a place for me to do some additional OER work, and I was very excited to learn that there was. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But one idea that was introduced very early on in the OFAR course that really reframed my concept of being an anti-racist educator was the difference between being anti-racist and not a racist. I think this was like one of our very first modules and discussion boards. And I had never really thought through the difference between those terms and how being an anti-racist involves a much more active approach, both in my professional teaching life as well as my personal life, where I have opportunities to educate beyond the classroom. Within my classroom, I began focusing the content and activities around the concept of our classroom community, exploring our own identities and interrogating our own implicit and explicit biases in an effort to be anti-racist rather than just not racist. So prior to this, I had readings that were representative of many of the students in my classes. I thought I was doing all the things, right? But I wasn't quite hitting on that part that involves each of us as individuals and what our role is in being anti-racist. So that was kind of at the center of what I wanted to focus on for my OFAR work. As a result, there were some informal changes in my classroom. I was much more mindful about directly pointing out and pausing to discuss incidences of racism as they would come up in conversations or texts that we were reading. Just to give you one example, one day before class was even started, one of my students was telling a story about how she got lost in the hospital and she was going there to meet up with her father who'd gone to the emergency room. She was wandering through all of these different spaces that were not for patients or visitors. They were mostly for the medical professionals. She even interacted with some security guards and nurses and all sorts of people, and when she was just asking for directions. When she finally made her way over to the ER, she was stopped by one of the nurses there and said, "Hey, you have pepper spray. That's a weapon. They weren't supposed to let you enter the hospital with that pepper spray. You need to give it to me now." So she turned over the pepper spray, and that was kind of the end of the incident. Well, the student telling the story was a young white woman. And for the class, they were all laughing and thought it was funny that she made it through the whole hospital without any sort of, repercussions. And it was just a funny thing that happened. But I said, what would have happened if she was a different race? Or, what would have happened? Let's kind of play around with this a little bit. And it opened up a conversation about white privilege and all sorts of things that it was very informal. I didn't intend for that to happen that day, but it was important. And it led us into talking about, it wasn't off topic because the class was built around that, if that makes sense. So in addition to these informal opportunities, I also set some goals for my project, and I wanted to focus on 2 specific goals. So I'm going to share my screen now and show you what I did. Okay. So my first goal centered around, sorry, I feel like I can't click on what I need to. I'm not as flawless as you, Noah. Here we go. So my first goal centered around taking notes on where I could revise or add examples and images that were more inclusive and anti-racist. So like I said, I'd done a lot of work previously on making sure I had readings that were very inclusive and representative of my students. And I thought that my major writing assignments did some of that already, but I hadn't spent a lot of time on my lecture slides or my like sentence level writing exercises or things like that, or examples that I would give for different things. And so I really wanted to spend some time taking notes on that. I was obviously teaching at the same time that I was going through the OFAR coursework. And so it was a lot to do all at once. So I set myself the goal of just taking notes and revising them at a later time. So last semester I took notes. I kind of did some playing around with what I might want to change and how. And then I spent the summer kind of looking for different resources. And then this semester I plan to kind of really do those revisions. If you want more info about that, I also have under this drop-down list, this set of diverse and inclusive image collections that somebody in the OFAR, the OFAR teachers or coaches on there gave me this list, and it's been super helpful. So I thought I'd put it up here for anyone who may be looking for images that are more representative or inclusive. So that's there. And then my second goal was to use open pedagogy to have students create research project websites or portfolios. And like I said, I'd already been using OER materials, but this idea of open pedagogy, I hadn't spent a lot of time exploring. So I wanted my students, for those of you who are not familiar with what that term means, it means to have your students actually create content that can then be shared with others. That's kind of a very simple explanation. And maybe my cohort here will expand upon that during their presentations. So for the kind of as a focus of the whole semester, they were creating this project website through Google Sites. But it was really focused on a topic related to racism, stereotyping, and or education. And if you have any interest in seeing the actual assignment, it's on here. You can take a peek through it. You can see what the requirements were and kind of how I laid it out. But I'd really like to spend just a moment kind of showing you a sample of one of these websites so you can see what it looks like. So I have down here a link to this sample if you want to spend some additional time looking at that after my presentation. I'm just going to hit on some of the highlights as we go through. Let's see here. Okay, so this particular site was actually created by my student assistant. So those of you who don't know, in many of our 300 or 380 courses, we can request a student assistant. And my student assistant put this together as a model site for the students. We had been working together for some time at this point, so she kind of knew my course in and out, and I needed something for her time to go into. And I thought this is a great way for her to spend time modeling for the students what we are going to be doing. So she created this site. And I do have a few from students who have said they could share them as well. But I feel like this one kind of hits on all of the major things that I just wanted to point out really briefly in my last couple of seconds here. Well, I think I have 2 minutes or so. So this is the home page, but I'm actually going to start you on the sources page because that's where we started. The students, on this sources page, you'll see the works cited, which is a list of the sources they actually used within the site itself. And then underneath this, you can see that one of the second essay that we did was a summary and analysis of one of the sources. So students often tell me that the scariest thing about the research project is the length of it and how to actually look at source material and figure out what to do with it. So one of the first things we do is to start looking for sources together and then to use one of those sources to summarize it together and then write some sort of response or analysis to that source. So that's posted on this page. And then they start building an annotated bibliography. So rather than having students kind of come up with their argument first, I asked them to really look for sources related to the argument and keep their minds open to ideas that they may find that might be different than their initial idea about where they wanted to go with their topics. So they create an annotated bibliography, which looks at sources and talks about why those sources are significant in relation to their topic. And that's all on their sources page. And then just to kind of highlight what each of the other pages are, the home page is a place where they share some background on the topic. And in the center, this is their overall claim for the site. So this is where the focus is. This is what they really are trying to prove or show on this website. They give a little bit of history and a video that's related in some way. And then the second page is the Why It Matters page. Here they lay out 3 different premises about why this issue is important, and they develop those through source information as well. And then on the attempted solutions page, they offer 2 different solutions that have been attempted in the past, and they do some counter arguments. So they might concede that parts of these solutions work well, but other parts of them need a little bit more work, or they just didn't work because they were missing something that was important. So there's some counter argument on this page. And then we have the My Solution page where the students actually propose their own way of handling the issue or addressing the issue in some way. And they use some research to show that that proposal might actually address the issue as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to let me share, and I'm going to pass this off and over to Gail.
Hi, where am I? Let's see. Oops. Oh, hi there. Here I am. Let me get my my notes. I wanted to, first of all, I can't tell you how thrilled and privileged I feel to have been in this cohort with this incredible group of talented, clever, kind, generous group of people. So anyway, I wanted to also start with some reflections after this many months journey in OFAR. And the first thing is like what I think about now when I look at my courses, when I think about my students, I ask, how does racism, how does it show up in my coursework and instructional practices, in my quizzes, in the choice of words I use in a discussion prompt, an assignment instruction, the headers in my orientation module, stated expectations and rubrics. Every single word could be, and of course is, a choice I've made through my cis white married female lens. Does my syllabus still contain any punitive language as I comb through it for the 100th time, and I will do it for 100 more times, in my correspondence, in my comments? It's like nothing should be taken for granted or assumed. That okay, I'm done. I've done that, and that's one of the biggest takeaways from this experience. A prompt we had in a discussion, a reflection discussion, was what lessons have you learned that might be helpful to others making this journey? The first one: trust your students to guide you. Be open to not knowing, to learning. Be honest. Be aware of your own implicit bias. Beware of the white gaze, of colonial thinking, and how these may manifest in, like I said, every single word you choose to write, you choose to speak, or the words of others that you decide to share with students. Stay open, take risks, resolve to learn, to grow, to bend, to work at it, and ask for help. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. All right, this is my resource page on our website, my Google site. So I teach a class, Diversity in American Drama. Seems to be inherently, obvious in that title that we're going to talk about diversity, racism, maybe even anti-racism. But the curriculum does not directly address or discuss the way racism and white supremacy have shaped and corrupted our theater institutions in America. I have a course description here. It's very innocuous, doesn't seem very offensive, but the SLOs are so awkward. I struggle with their meaning. So it's even more clear to me now after this experience with OFAR that curriculum revision is also called for, not just the stuff in our classes that we share with students, but the actual curriculum over in Socrates. because as one of my colleagues, Greg, pointed out, course outlines of record with their often awkwardly written outcomes are the very definition of structure in our system and therefore a core place to embed anti-racism. We instructors come and go, but that curriculum endures. So here's an example of one of my short-term goals, which was to create a new module toward an anti-racist American theater. The foundation of the module begins with that statement, "We see you, white American theater." The link is here. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, a coalition of theater artists came together and posted a 29-page set of demands that, if followed, adopted, would amount to a sweeping restructuring of the theater ecosystem in America. The barriers to execution and completion to this goal. I mean, we have to talk about what can sort of get in the way of the work that we want to do. And one is not just time, but for me, it was why? What is the objective? It had to be more than, oh, I said I would do this. It's more than it was an assignment. I was thinking long and hard about the why. I value the principles of anti-racist pedagogy, but what does it look like in real life, in action, and how will it be relevant to students? And then it hit me. Start with their questions. Start with their students. Like Noah mentioned, what do they think about their place in biology and how they relate to it? The story in Kelsey's classroom. We start with our students. In an early module in my course, that it's simply titled Diversity, and the objective is to unpack and articulate our personal definitions for the words in the title of the class, diversity and theater, to come to shared understanding of what we mean when we talk about the topic. And in the module, I asked the students in a small group introduction, when they're making introductions to each other, to share what diversity means to them. What is a definition that they carry with them? Where did they see diversity in their community, school, work? And then finally share with us, what are the questions we should be asking in this course? And here is a sample of their wisdom and their curiosity. Are we going to be discussing topics like racism? How has the representation of diverse identities evolved in American theater over the years? Is there a problem with a lack of diversity in theater, and what could be done to improve this? How can we contribute to promoting inclusivity within the realm of American drama? The students showed me the way, and I was relieved to have such good guides. They read this letter, Dear White American Theater, and these are a sample of their discussion posts. A couple of them really just like hit me in their wisdom, the astute observations, and what they saw and what they know. Quote, I may be white, but I'm a woman, or I may be white, but I'm gay, also stood out to me, as it feels like white privileged individuals who declare statements such as these are trying to compare oppressions. Another point that caught my eye, the BIPOC community acknowledging the way the white community unchallenged their white privilege, and so on. One of my favorite parts of this module was to introduce them to the playwright August Wilson, who is one of my favorite playwrights. And in the course, we read his play, The Piano Lesson. When the movement first introduced itself in 2020, they invoked the principles set down in the speech by August Wilson, The Ground on Which I Stand. You can read it here. So how do I get these students to read a 6,000-word speech and respond, blah, blah, blah? Before August Wilson began his work as a playwright, he's a poet. So his plays are lyrical, full of rhythm and melody, and they belong in your ear and in your mouth, is how I say it. So I asked students to choose paragraphs from his speech and record them, or record someone else. If they didn't want to, I don't like the sound of my voice, you can record someone else, but choose 3 paragraphs from various places in the speech, record them, tell me why you chose those, what they mean to you, are they still relevant today? and then share those recordings with your classmates in a discussion topic. There are some samples here. I have to say the assignment was a challenge technically for some students and will need more specific support and refinement in the future. But I was so moved. I was moved. They were moved. Anyway, I thought it was kind of cool. So further on in the module, there's just some examples of readings from theater makers, more readings from the coalition that that put forth the statement, principles for building anti-racist theater systems. So the kinds of demands and call to action are in this document. Having the students understand what equitable presence means, and to understand the call to American theater to become a co-conspirator in anti-racism. So, taking all this information, I asked them to do a little investigation and research theater companies locally, nationally, to find an example of responses to this statement. We see you, white American theater. And then share so they have this information, this investigation. I found this out. Here are my fellow students. Here's what I found. So this is I would say maybe this is open pedagogy in like lowercase letters. It's not published on a website or anything, but they are learning something and sharing it with their classmates. I did provide an example of how to do you modeled it, but that was it. So I said, first of all, does this theater company have a statement of anti-racism practice? Is their statement reflected in their hiring practices? Is their statement reflected in artistic choices? Is their statement reflected in the membership of their board of directors who make those decisions, right? And then a personal reflection, taking into consideration everything you've absorbed in this module. How do you feel about what you discovered as you looked into these particular theater companies? And I have examples of some of their observations, like for the Alliance Theater. They mentioned that they're very diverse, but the majority of their staffing is white. They seem to be diverse or not so much, but they do a great job with choosing meaningful stories that highlight BIPOC experiences. My objective for any theater course I teach is for a student to gain an appreciation for theater, that when they step into the theater, because I want them to go into the theater, that they will be an audience member who will be engaged with the storytelling, who will bring a critical thinking mindset to the experience, to appreciate it, and specifically for this course to understand and appreciate the progress or lack thereof of diversity in American theater. So I feel like this module, with further edits and tweaks to make it more robust, more engaging, expand on what I can do with open pedagogy, will become a pillar in the course and can serve both this objective and the soon to be revised SLOs and curriculum. I have a link to the module in Commons and this sort of a highlighted picture. Anyway, yeah, that was one of my little projects in this kit, and I'll stop sharing. And who do I pass it on to? Jenna.
All right. Let me spotlight myself. Okay, there we go. Hi, Kayla, do I still have you? There we go. Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. So I guess where I want to start was where I was when I started this program. And I'm just looking for my page, and I think this is it. No, maybe not. Oh dear, I think that's it. Yes, okay, cool. So where I began when I started with OFAR, when I enrolled in OFAR, is I'd already been participating in the OER program. Like Kelsey, I was the lead for science. And that was a really big change for me, for my classes, because prior to that, I had been using, you know, publisher materials. And so where I started was basically at the beginning of OFAR was zero textbook cost. And I was using like materials that I had created on my own Canvas course and curated videos and a LibreText. And I had a liquid syllabus Google site. So I was in the kind of like open part of things. And so what OFAR did was encouraged me to make sweeping changes to my course to make it more student-centered, more inclusive, and to highlight my students' voices and voices of women and people of color in medicine and in science. So on the Google site, the link that I shared earlier, I've got my own page here, and I have 5 goals that I developed for OFAR. Felt like being really ambitious, I guess. It's kind of just sort of the way I operate. Anyway, so my first goal that I had was to increase the use of inclusive language in my syllabus, course policies, and assessment instructions. You can see the other 5 goals there, but I'll go through them one by one. So the first goal was relatively straightforward because I already had a liquid syllabus. So I just wanted to update the policies and the language that I used in there. And I'll give you a little brief view of my syllabus. This syllabus is adapted from the Equity and Culturally Responsive Teaching liquid syllabus that was developed by Kelsey and Greg and a number of others when they offered the course at CRC. And anyway, so the idea with this was just to improve the language so that students felt like they were welcome here, and so that they kind of had an idea of what to expect. And some of the things that that I added in here were policies that are very different than they were before, and I'll get to that in a moment. So I also updated my course policies page in my Canvas course and softened the language in a lot of areas so that it wasn't quite so punitive. And I also did something called a community norms Padlet, which was something that my students did at the very beginning of the semester. And it's just a page within Canvas that asks my students how they wish to be treated and how they plan to treat their peers. And I put the Padlet right in the module, and the students can type right into it here. And I was just like, I was practically in tears with all of the wonderful things that students had to say to each other about creating an inclusive and welcoming learning environment. Like it was really, really cool. Okay, so the second goal that I had was to eliminate course policies and practices that could be marginalizing some of my students even further than they're already marginalized, or discriminating against certain students. And I decided to just like go wild with this one in terms of like go as permissive as I could and see what would happen. So I eliminated late fees. I allowed revisions for an extended period of time, meaning that students could resubmit to get credit for an assignment. Many of my assignments are complete, incomplete, and so they must meet the criteria in the rubric in order to get a complete or full credit. And if they don't meet that, then they get to resubmit. And in some cases, it took them 5 submissions to get there. And it may have taken them several weeks to do so. But my goal is for everyone to meet the learning outcomes for the module and the learning outcomes for the course. And that was the kind of my approach to ensure that they were able to do so. I also expanded options for the format of student submissions. So rather than just having like text-based format, and this includes for discussions as well as regular assignments, I allowed media recordings, audio or video, and also images and text. And so I'm going to show you just an example of one of my assignments here. And this one works on the principles of metacognition and how students are often more successful if they're given an opportunity to reflect on their learning. And this particular assignment is on growth mindset. And again, my students like totally blew me away in terms of the work that they submitted, and also the confidence that they had in themselves and their ability to see an obstacle, anticipate it, and plan for how they were going to work past that obstacle. So what I'm just showing you here is my instructions for multiple forms of submission. So although like it's easy to just write in, you know, your assignment instructions, like, hey, you can submit any which way you want. I found that that was not really very clear. So I gave students instructions specifically for how to submit each thing. And I wanted to make it so that they felt comfortable with doing the submission. And so some of my students just basically like recorded themselves on their phone stream of consciousness. And that was awesome. And the nice part about, if you're like me, I need to listen to everything sped up. That's just kind of the way I operate at like 1.75 speed. And so the nice part with media recordings is that you can actually speed that up for yourself if you need to. Okay, and then the last thing that I did for goal number 2 was I explored equitable grading strategies. I haven't entirely implemented them. I did mention that I did the complete incomplete, but I haven't like completely gone away from using a point value and letter grades. I think Kelsey can probably talk to her experiences with contract grading, and possibly Rosie as well. So they would probably be better resources if you have questions about that. My third goal was to incorporate student voices and lived experiences in the learning process. And so again, I tried to have these reflection activities where students could draw on their lived experiences. And so in this case, I pulled some STEM inspiration profiles from an open resource that was developed by Julie Oliver, who I believe is here in the crowd. So thank you, Julie. And I chose 2 that I thought would be a good starting point. I plan on incorporating more later. And so the students read they read this profile, whose interviews with this particular student or professional about the obstacles and the challenges that they had getting to where they are in STEM. And then I asked my students to reflect on it, and especially on their educational experiences, and then what they've learned from these inspiring profiles that they can apply to their own academic journey. And when I asked students at the end of the semester what they thought about that, what they thought about the discussions, this was by far their favorite discussion of the whole semester, even though other ones they had opportunities to talk about, you know, biology. That was the one they really liked. And then I also do another Padlet later on, and I'm not going to show this one, but it's called Roses, Thorns, and Buds. And it's the same basic idea. I embedded a Padlet in the module, and it's not an assignment or anything. It's anonymous, and the students are identifying something that has been a growth point for them. So that would be a bud, like where they've identified an area for growth. Something that was a real win for them, a rose, and then something that was a real challenge for them, a thorn. And so they just list those, and they could be content related, or they could be like learning related. And so students were just kind of there to share and build each other up. And so that was cool. Another part of this was incorporating my students' work into the course. And this is where the open pedagogy part comes into play. I haven't asked my students yet to Creative Commons license their work. That's the next step, so that I can share this stuff more broadly. Right now, it's they've just given me permission to share the work that they've done within the class. And so here's an example. We're in the endocrine system module, which is the study of hormones. And so I include 2 infographics that are produced as part of a group project for my students about diabetes. So one about type 1 diabetes. And so this is just kind of like a preview of their infographic. And then another one about type 2 diabetes. Now, these are actually products of student work doing the group project, which I'm going to get to in just a moment. Okay, so my 4th goal, man, I had a lot of goals. My 4th goal was to increase the awareness of discriminatory and racist practices and/or outcomes in biology, public health, and medicine. Most of my students are going into the allied health field, and so they're going to be medical assistants, maybe sonographers. Some of them may go on to nursing. And so they're going to be working with patients, and so I wanted them to be aware of some of the inequities that exist in the healthcare field, so that they could, you know, possibly be involved in the solution. And so the group project, open yet another tab. The group project had a very specific learning objective, and this was a project that students did over the course of 8 weeks. Half of the semester, they worked with a group of peers, a small group of peers, and these are all their learning goals. But I want to point out this one right here, which was identify how some groups may be historically underserved, marginalized, and or disproportionately impacted by the disease that they chose, or by institutional practices and long-held beliefs of the medical field. And so, for example, when I talked about type 2 diabetes, many of my students learned that that there is actually a race factor. That's my timer. There's actually a race factor in the kidney function. In the kidney function calculations that makes it harder for patients of African descent to get a kidney transplant or to be eligible for dialysis. And so my students learn more about that. I also developed some supporting materials that talk about some issues that are peripherally related to anatomy and physiology. One of them is about plasma donation in our blood unit, where we learn about how certain parts of the United States are targeted for blood plasma because there is a greater proportion of low-income targets, if you will, for donating. I mean, obviously we all need plasma, but the plasma companies themselves will target certain neighborhoods and certain areas of the United States for more plasma donor recruitment. Okay, lastly, and this is a long-term plan, is to develop or curate learning resources that elevate the voices of underrepresented groups in science and the medical field. And this kind of goes along with what Noah was saying about, biology and science in general being an old white boys club. And so one of the things that I've been working on is to curate profiles and social media work and publications of medical practitioners that are non-white and use them as an example. And this particular person here, Joel Burvell, is he's known as the medical mythbuster. He is a student, the first Black student to graduate from the UW School of Medicine. And he's actually been really proactive in describing how medical conditions look different in patients of color, and also elevating issues that most people would not be aware of in terms of healthcare disparities. And so I'm working on trying to collect more information about that. So the last thing I want to do, because I know I'm out of time, is I just want to, oops, wrong one. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Oh, I lost it. Okay. Anyway, on the OFAR website, which somehow has disappeared from my screen, I do want to let you know that there's a whole lot of resources that I've shared on there that are all openly licensed, and they're on Canvas Commons, and you can click on them and, oh, maybe it's this one here. Yeah, right here at the bottom. So anyway, you can pick and choose if you want to adapt any of that stuff. So thank you. And I'll give it over to Rosie.
How am I supposed to top that? Just kidding. All right. Thank you all. Bear with me here as I pull up my landing page in our OFAR website. Get this bar to go away. All right. I'm just going to kind of talk through what I did. Well, first, let me start off with just a short reflection on where was I in terms of anti-racist, inclusive, culturally responsive consciousness, right? I think I was pretty much there. What crystallized the connection between open pedagogy and anti-racist, inclusive pedagogies was basically being an OFAR. So now I know and I see the connections more clear. And I think too, democratizing democratizing learning and including students a part of the learning process, assessment process, and actually students' works, improving learning outcomes, I think, is what really made was more clear to me now. When I was in my TESOL and program at Sac State and practicing teaching in the Sac State writing program, I had already been doing, incorporating OER and doing open pedagogy, because I have students do labor-based grading contracts, and I also have them, I do portfolio assessment, digital portfolio assessment, right, which is considered equitable. So that in itself is a learning artifact that faculty can use to improve the learning outcomes of their department. That is definitely what has been crystallized. And then another thing that I've really been just what I've loved and been inspired by is learning from all the other faculty and seeing the connections too, like how our intersectional identity really influences and does shape our teaching philosophies about assessment and learning. Yeah, just wanted to say that. But anyways, as a participant in the 2023-2024 Open for Anti-Racism program, we all wrote anti-racist action plans, right? After we explored how open pedagogy and open educational resources can support anti-racist inclusive teaching practices. You're more than welcome to check out my slides right here. I'm not going to go through every single one. You're more than welcome to look at it on your own. I just want to talk a little bit about what I was specifically interested in doing to make sure that students were really centered in my courses for our research and mass communications unit. So I really wanted to implement a research project that fostered students' abilities to investigate the following. What is embodied solidarity? I aimed to tap into students' emotional, intellectual intelligence and build on students' cultural competence and active listening and learning practices with careful consideration to how different peoples from different backgrounds have been represented in both the historical and contemporary records, such as text, media, movies, books, policy, to name a few, right? I also wanted to make sure that this project allowed students to think about what it means to report with integrity in a time where nuanced discourse has ceased to exist. That in order for life experiences to be valid, real, nuance and complexity needs to be illuminated, embraced, recorded, and authentically presented. So for more details about this project, you can see the 2 prompts that I created for English 300. I solicited students' feedback about this project to help me refine the prompt, to make sure that the prompt was clear and guiding for students. And then I was flexible about how they chose to present their findings, as long as they adhered to the ethics of qualitative research as outlined in our assessment composition requirements, and then also as outlined from the readings, which you can also access below. Overall, this project was a success because I learned about important issues and topics and even excluded histories that I had no idea about from my students that they were passionate about sharing. And while there were some challenges, like I said, which I transparently discuss in my written reflections and in my part 2 video, where I kind of give a talk through, I think that students were successful in completing this project. So in this landing page, as I said, you'll find my OFAR action plan in Google Slides, introducing my teaching methods, and then my instruction, like step-by-step process, kind of like what Noah showed right here. If you go through, you'll be able to see just step-by-step process on how I supported students as scaffolding. And then you'll also be able to find, there's 2 different prompts. So students and I created one prompt for like a podcast to share their works in a podcast, and then one to share their works in a digital archive. Again, you can access that below. And then I also conducted an oral history interview with my colleague and team lead, Greg Breyer, to set students up for success and kind of model what it is to listen to another person's story, to bear witness to their story. Yeah. So at this point, I would like to just talk a little bit about how I scaffolded students to support their learning and understanding of cognitive and confirmation bias. So before they even entered the research module, they learned about cognitive and confirmation bias and how this influences our thought processes, right? How bias influences our deeply held beliefs about topics. Students also had many opportunities to decipher and distinguish the difference between critical analysis and synthesis. So like knowing the difference between summary, analysis, and synthesis writing so that students can really demonstrate critical thinking in their writing. And then casually, I started a conversation in Canvas. I said, hey, what does solidarity and integrity mean to you in your own words? If you're anything like me, when you look in a dictionary, a lot of the words are very stale and abstract. And, I think actually us humans, we give words more meaning and more life. So in your own words, share what these words mean to you, and then comment on 2 or 3 classmates that you felt enriched the definition even further. And students did that. And then I had them watch a interview on Democracy Now! It was recorded back in 2003. And I asked them to consider, how did Howard Zinn embody solidarity and use his integrity when researching, telling stories, and standing with others who were from different subgroups, different and came from different communities? So you're more than welcome to see some of their responses. But I wanted to read one of students' responses about the definition of what is solidarity and integrity embodied. I have it here. You can't see it, but I'll read it out loud. I think both of these words are interconnected. Solidarity is unity. Solidarity is a blessing only if we accept the fact that we are all different. And these differences, in a way, make us stronger together because different skills and talents combined together can make us able to work together. On the other hand, integrity is when someone is able to side with truth and staying truthful to your values and the people around them. Integrity is also loyalty and respecting others' personal boundaries and values. Therefore, in order to achieve solidarity, we must show integrity. And then I really wanted students to engage deeper and conceptualize deeper what this means, solidarity and integrity embodied. So I had them watch a TED Talk. It was a Palestinian and an Israeli face-to-face. So Palestinian peacemaker Aziz Abu Sarrah, and then also Israeli peacemaker Moaz Inan discussed the immeasurable tragedies that they've experienced in the region. And I asked them to watch this TED Talk, and I said, as you watch this, I want you to think about the Solidarity Research Project and interviews you're conducting, and the question that's guiding our research module, which was, how can oral history stories lead to an inclusive democratic society? Take notes on anything that sparks your interest or can help inform you how you deal with conflict in your personal life. After watching this too, consider how to answer this question. What is solidarity embodied in practice? And then has your definition of the words changed? And I highly encourage y'all to check out some of students' responses. I know we're getting crunched on time, so I just wanted to take an opportunity to show you just a few students' work. So if you go all the way down here, one second here. I have a lot of resources in my personal website. Open pedagogy defined, what are disposable assignments? And then if you're interested in having your students CC their work, if you click here, there's the form, just FYI. But I'm going to click on the Solidarity Project, Preserving an Oral History Story, the Marshallese Nuclear History Story by Ariel Ladij, one of my students. So this past spring, I had the privilege of learning from Ariel Ladij, a Marshallese native descendant. For Major Project 2, Ariel wrote a critical discourse analysis of Marshallese poet and activist Kathy Gentle Kinginger's poem, Anointed. In Ariel's critical essay titled Nuclear Justice for the Marshall Islands, Ariel analyzes and synthesizes the meaning of the poem Anointed, shedding light on the nuclear bomb testing that was conducted on the Marshall Islands after World War II, which had dire effects on many Marshallese people's lives to this day. I had no idea about this, by the way. For our Solidarity Preserving Oral History Story Research Unit, Ariel decided to interview her grandmother, a native Marshallese island survivor. Ariel's interview gives voice to her grandmother, where she orates her lived experiences living on the island during the US nuclear bomb testing on her peoples, and discusses the dire environmental and health effects that resulted from the bomb's toxic exposure. So if you click here, it'll take you to her literacy portfolio. She has an author page. Here are literacy reflections, major project 1, 2, but this is the final project, and you're able to see her process, her reading and writing, researching process. So yeah, feel free to come back and check this out. And then there's also one more I wanted to share just really quickly from my ESL 47, which originally I was not planning on implementing my OFAR action plan in that class, but I challenged myself to. So Rowand was a Palestinian student in my class, and she decided for her end of the term project, she wanted to share her Palestinian oral history, sharing sources, significant memories, and artifacts that have shaped her and her family. Rowand supports the story of her native country's origin using open educational resources as cited and hyperlinked in her PowerPoint presentation slides and at the end of her Google Sites landing page too. So students in my novice intermediate ESL 47 class really worked hard to develop their practices in formal citations and paraphrasing the works of others to support their personal ideas. It's not perfect, but they were practicing. But nevertheless, considered Rowand's work to be a curation of a combination of both outside sources and personal sources that make meaning to show aspects of Rowand's oral history story. And I'll click on it real quick. So you could see for the ESL 47, it's slightly different than English 300. So they have their ESL 47 portfolio with vocabulary fluency. And if you click here, there's a whole bunch of other subpages, but this, and they also have a page dedicated to their research. So her main topic was, how did Palestine originate? What are the different customs and traditions of Palestine? And then what are the significant memories of me and my family's story in Palestine? So you go through here. So I would say this student is very aware of their audience because there's clear subheadings. So yeah, they're taking into consideration, you know, how do you say, important composition, right? Awareness. So they're very aware of their audience, and this genre is multimodal, right? And then if you scroll all the way down, you have access to her PowerPoint and then her works cited. And so I'll allow you on your own time to check that out and go through the slides to bear witness. Yeah, her personal story, how her identity has shaped her. And that's all I have for now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, sorry, Gail.
No, I was just gonna say we have like 6 minutes for some questions. Right? Are we here till 4:15? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm
I
good to stay a little after.
So I just wanted to jump in. I just want to thank you all for doing this. This is amazing, amazing work. I'm getting teary-eyed. And I know that you all received a small stipend to do this work, but I know it didn't nearly pay for the hundreds of hours that you put into this. But I hope others that are here as witness to it, you can see that sometimes doing things not just for monetary gain can lead to some amazing outcomes. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks. I see Julie's hand up and then Linda.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of echo what Andy just said and make the statement that this presentation should have been our convocation presentation tomorrow morning. This was freaking phenomenal. Our entire community needs to hear it and see it and know that this work can be done both online and on ground. A little angst this morning over that. So I just commend all of you. I hope this spreads like wildfire. I have some questions for Jenna, but since she's my bio colleague, I'll save them for later and let other people speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Linda?
Oh, yeah, I just want to say how much I appreciate this too, and that I was getting teary also, as I was getting teary this morning during listening to some of my colleagues in our Solidarity Palestine event, where there was some interesting crossover between that and this. And I think what really excited me is the prospect of people working interdisciplinarily. I remember when I first started teaching at CRC in 2003, a couple colleagues and I, in other disciplines, history and a few others, people I had met, and we were kind of simpatico, and we were like, wouldn't it be cool to team teach? And then we are like, financially, that's never going to happen here. But I have this dream that, you know, it could be possible that we could create like cohorts or team teaching where we could bring together across disciplines in a more formal way, you know, to support students in their progress. I think so many amazing things could happen, and like what's on offer here, in the way that it sounds like you all collaborated with each other in this program sounds just really amazing. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Linda. Other questions or comments?
I had a question, well, and comment. I'm equally inspired and moved. So thank you all so much for everything you shared. I'm just like, is it too late for me to throw away everything I was going to do this semester and start from scratch? But no, trying to build on what I already have. I do teach online, and I'm really committed to group projects online, even though I do get some pushback from students, but I really believe it's so valuable for them. And I also do a lot of oral history projects. So I really I'm going to check out what Rosie shared with that as well. But I was wondering if any of you had a couple tips to share on some like best practices with some of the group projects that you did. Just maybe a couple quick ones. Jenna, I really want to check out more of the disease presentation that your students put together. So if anybody would want to chime in, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And thank you again.
Sure, I can chime in a little bit about group projects. They're a real pain. Logistically speaking, Canvas is not really well set up for group projects. You know how students can set up their notifications in order to know when someone's responded to a thread in the discussions. Well, you can't do that for the Canvas groups area. So students do not receive notifications, and it is really convoluted to access Canvas groups. However, I have many dual enrollment students in my classes, and I can't use Discord. I refuse to use Discord. I tried setting it up with Google Groups, and that's a real pain too. So if you are someone like me and Diana, who really, really want to keep doing group projects, please go to Academic Senate and DEIT and say how important it would be for us to have a proper multimedia real-time communication application that integrates with Canvas that students can also use on their phones. I'm sorry, Diana, that doesn't really answer your question. To answer your question, you just really have to set expectations, get them started early, have weekly check-ins and deliverables to keep them on task, and then give them grace when somebody, ghosts their group, and find ways to make it work for who remains.
I just want to add to that. I totally agree with everything that Jenna said, but I just kind of had to wash my hands of keeping track of communication. So I let them use Discord if they want to, but I'm not part of their Discord, or they can use whatever means of communication they want that works best for them. But I do, as Jenna said, I have checkpoints to find out where they're at with things. They have to produce deliverables along the way. And I also ask each person to be responsible for a particular role in the group. And there should be at least somebody who's the communicator to me, so I know what's happening with things and if there is an issue and that sort of thing. Of course, that doesn't handle all of the things that arise, but I had to let go of trying to monitor everything and make sure that they were on track and just kind of put that into their court. And occasionally you do have those students who, as Jenna said, just ghost everybody. And I also have a part at the end where I ask them to reflect on their teammates' contributions. And they know that's coming and they're going to have that. And I do say that it could change their grade in some way. So that generally helps keep them on track, but it is challenging, but it is so valuable. I've had so many students say that it was one of the only classes in which they actually felt like they knew people that was online, because they were able to do the group work.
I wanted to mention, it's not about the group projects, but there is a call for OFAR 2526 for participants. Was an email. I was trying to find a link that we could put in the chat. The heading
It's
is
on the last page of the OFAR website. It's on the resources page of our
Right.
OFAR website. Yeah, we just got an email notification saying that maybe Andy can help with communications and put that on. I know you already do a lot,
Yeah.
Andy.
No, I just want to caution, and I will confirm, but it is my understanding that they will not allow the same college to participate again.
That sucks. It's okay. We're all here to support you all. And just implementing one change every semester, that's fine. You got to be kind to yourself when you're doing this work and just little by little changes. That's the goal.
Yeah.
That's such a great point, what Rosie said. As I mentioned in my presentation, I was going to change all my slides and all of my exercises. And I went, okay, wait a minute, take a step back. Let's focus on just taking notes this semester, and then you can make the changes. So just pace yourselves, because it's easy to get really excited because it is exciting work, right? But try to just take it one step at a time. And as Diana said, I always get excited at flex opportunities and think, oh, I'm going to make this change right before the semester starts. And it's just very difficult to do that. So just one thing at a time. I do want to be mindful of all of your time, and I know the rest of us do as well, but I'm able to hang out if anybody has questions for me. I think Rosie said she could. But if anybody needs to leave, please feel free. Thank you for coming. You've been an amazing audience. We really appreciate you.
Yes, thank you. I can spare 10 minutes.